Hi, everyone. Good morning. Thanks so much for joining today's webinar on BPC Embedded HR Planning. My name is Laura Milojevic. I'm the Marketing and Business Development Director at SimpleFi. And right now, I'd love to introduce you to one of our managing partners, Charles Sindelar, who's going to be doing today's webinar. So Charles, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Lauren. So today, everyone, we're going to be talking about HR planning using BPC Embedded. And while it's a technical SAP tool, I'm really going to be talking about it from not just a implementation standpoint, but for about 20 years, I've been doing planning of various types, and I wanted to, when we developed this and we've implemented it a few times, it was really about labor savings. We have this very powerful tool, but how do we implement it in a way that makes everyone's lives easier, taking away some of the rote analysis of things and key punching, but at the same time enhance accuracy and give greater visibility and accountability. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. So, page down here. So, brief intro we're going to cover today, just who SimpleFi is, and I promise I won't spend a long time on it. A lot of you I know we have some familiar faces on the attendee list, but there's always a few new people, so we'll cover that. We'll go over the overview of the benefits of the system, really the structure of how it's put together. I think it's really important to understand how this HR planning tool using SAP, BPC Embedded can, how it's built and how it will not only, provide the benefits I talked about earlier, but also how it's kind of transformational to your organization. And in order to understand that, you need to understand a little bit about how we're trying to structure it. And one of the good things is HR is fairly common and consistent amongst different organizations. Everyone gets payroll, everyone has different taxes in the United States. Rolling this out internationally, which we've done, is, there's more variables. We can talk about that. So we'll talk about the structure, and then we'll do a little demo and kick the tires of a system. Okay, so who is SimpleFi? We're an SAP partner, recognized expertise in EPM, and we are based out of Chicago. Our office is actually in Oak Park, which is directly west of the city. We are staffed with a large number of CPAs and MBAs, and we have some new people who are, either, they're learning the product, we're a growing organization. We focus on BPC Embedded and Optimize, SAP Analytics Cloud, the BW and SAP integration that supports that, and we also do predictive analytics. The average consultant has about 10 years of experience with SAP tools, and our niche is we really want to get 100% referenceable customers. So we're a little bigger than a boutique. We're a lot smaller than a large SI. So we try and really focus our niche on expertise around the analytics area, whether that's BPC, SAC, and what we also really try and do is we're local, so if you're in the Midwest, we can get to you easily. If you can see here is a list of our customers. A lot of them are Midwest based, but we do work internationally as well, and so that's not an issue. All right, so brief overview concluded. Let's talk a little bit about what we're trying to accomplish with this embedded planning tool. What we are really trying to do is to automate the planning to the extent that a lot of this stuff is already known, and whether you're doing a plan or a forecast, a lot of the assumptions are consistent and also need to be controlled. So basically, once the financial drivers are, such as salary increase or, various benefit levels are input into the system cranks it out automatically. It generates your baseline plan based on all the variables, the driver-based planning, and your current payroll. So once that all runs, you really only need to enter in the exceptions, things that are outside of the payroll system, such as we're hiring 2 new people. It's not entered in the payroll system yet. They're going to get hired in March, so we can put that into the plan. The other thing that it does is, since it's driver-based and the drivers are, somewhat controlled, and we'll talk about that, is you can run a report on the drivers. Did someone decide that for their cost center, the average, they were going to give out 10% merit increase when the guidance was 3%? Easy to report on that. The other thing that is important about this tool is for things like SUTA and FUTA caps. So those are your payroll, state unemployment, federal unemployment, Social Security. These kinds of calculations are done by the individual based on their salary, their state. It's not some broad assumption made by a cost center. The calculations are actually done at the individual level. And within that granularity, we also have different benefit and expense rates for each employee type. So, if summer interns don't participate in the 401k program, they, as an employee type, will not have a rate that generates an expense for the company for the 401k program. And the idea is, you get all this greater detail with actually less effort. And at the end of this, we'll drill down into a report where you can actually see how this is all built up so you can validate it. But in reality, once the system's set up and validated, it should just run automatically. You can always look at it and verify all the calculations, but it really takes it out of the end user's hands. It's also secure. A lot of times there's a very informal process of, okay, it's time to plan for everyone's payroll. HR either sends what the actual payroll is for people to the cost center managers who are doing the plan, and that's in an email, or even worse, they print it out, hand it off, and it's sitting on someone's desk. They send someone the wrong file. All of this is potential for compromising some sensitive information. But using a tool like SAP provides here, embedded, basically you can secure it by cost center, so that only the people who are cost center managers can see their respective cost centers, and higher level managers can see multiple cost centers. So that's a benefit of the tool. How it's actually implemented in embedded, we use SAP analysis for Office Excel on the front end. The existing payroll system, that provides benefits, bonus rates and base salaries. And that can be SAP-based system or third party. There's integration for both. The results, which are now at an individual level, can be rolled up into a higher level OPEX model that won't expose things that would be too sensitive if you're printing out reports to hand out in a boardroom or whatnot. And SimpleFi has not only done this with the embedded tool, we've done it with other SAP tools as well. So today we're talking about the embedded version of BPC, but we've implemented this in a whole host of other versions of BPC. Okay, so what do we have here? We have one detailed model that holds employee information, and we have driver-based calculations. And those driver-based calculations, are really detailed. We can even see the impact of merit increase on various expenses. The system allows for budgeted employees to transfer between cost centers, and we integrate the master data. So, you don't have to manually type in everybody's employee name. We're able to upload that from the HR system, the employee ID, and all the relative characteristics of what that employee is, part-time, full-time, what they do. Pull that into the system automatically so that there's no manual keying, and it's much more efficient that way. So what do you get out at the end of the day from the planning process? Secure reports that are specific to the HR model. This has been implemented a couple different ways. One of the concerns is always, can the basis administrators, can the database administrators see everyone's salary? And there's deployment options here to really restrict, down to like one person who is and only given firefighter access on a need basis to see that sensitive information. It's also very granular depending on the need. We could do it by cost center, division, business unit, etc. And you can see all that at that granular level. One of always a corporate interest really is, well, how many new employees did we hire this year, corporate-wide? And rather than going around and just polling every cost center manager, because we're using an integrated system here, we can look at that by cost center type, by new employee, by cost center into a report. And as I mentioned before, we can also look to make sure that people kind of stuck to the guidelines. You can control that by centrally loading things, or if you have a more flat organization where people are going to be in charge of entering their own rates, you can at least report on that to make sure people didn't get a little crazy. All right, so how does this whole planning process work? So payroll comes from the payroll system. Company-wide assumptions are loaded by either the head corporate manager or the cost center manager. You can load high level like a corporate. So if you want to say everybody's going to get a merit increase corporate-wide of 3%, that's fine. The cost center managers say, well, I want to load certain things as specific to either my business unit or, the state we're in. They can do that as well. How that's set up, there's a lot of discretion depending on the structure of an organization. Once all those assumptions are loaded, the driver-based calculations occur, and the base plan is formed. So once you have that base plan, now it goes back to the users to enter in things that are outside of what is known by the system. So if someone's going to get laid off or promoted, that's typically not information that's going to be in some system somewhere and when it's going to happen. So that we'll cover that off, and you have input templates there where you can execute that. Once everyone's made their manual changes, the consolidated results can be reported on either in the OPEX model or the HR model. And if you want to do it all again after you do a plan, you can copy all your assumptions into a forecast and forecast it monthly and pull in new payroll information and just iterate every month. And quite often for forecast, the payroll system is really going to be your driver for some of these things. Was the person hired, and what was the actual dollar amount they were hired at? You had an assumption in there for your plan. Now, rather than asking HR what that person was hired at, this flows right into the system. So just talk for a few minutes about the dimensionality here. And this is just sample, right? I mean, you can set up the dimensionality any way you want. Any level of granularity really fit the organization. As these tools are very customizable. So just for the purposes of this example, got cost center, account. employee name. You need to know who's in the cost centers. The type of employee. So that's really important. Like again, as I said, for like the interns. But it also can kind of be more important in that you need different payroll cadences is quite a popular topic. Full-time employees that are salaried may have one pay schedule. Hourly employees may have a payroll schedule that's, instead of being twice a month is every 2 weeks, something like that. Different countries, will have different cadences for payroll. All that's provided for by the combination of cost center employee type. Category that's more for the data slices, which we'll talk about, and audit trail, and obviously time. So what does that account? What are we actually planning? So here, we have salary and bonus, kind of the two things that come out of the payroll system that everyone knows about. Then we can calculate benefits that are really based on the head count, right? Doesn't matter what your pay rate is, your healthcare costs are probably going to be flat. They're not going to be driven by what your salary is. It's going to be like a tax would be. It's just going to be driven by, are you a full-time employee? Are full-time employees eligible for a benefit? What's the expense for the company for that benefit? And we kind of got some granularity there. Then we have profit sharing. And then, we have other fringe that, is not driver-based. So obviously, if there's stuff that needs to be planned in the HR model that's really maybe even not necessarily, some kind of expense that is booked to a cost center for HR, but it's not necessarily driven by headcount or salary, there's some accommodation for that. Okay. So again, we have some stat accounts. That's basically job grade, things like that we can put in there for even greater granularity. And we talked a little bit about the health benefits that are headcount driven. And then this is really where and just to touch on the headcount part of it, obviously the system will calculate for new employees a start date. So when you're entering new employees as part of a forecast that aren't part of your existing payroll, you enter them to a specific month and it starts the calculation there going forward. So if you are authorized to hire some people as part of your plan, but you don't actually get to hire them because of some other activities going on, they're going to say, well, you can't hire them until Q3. You can put them with a Q3 start date, and the benefits will calculate from there. The other benefits here that are salary driven calculate by person. So, and there's quite a bit of a consideration here in that a lot of 401k maybe is just 1%. We'll say the company contributes 1% of your salary, and that 1% is based on 12 months a year. 1% of your salary for 12 months a year. Same thing with for profit sharing or bonus, or bonus accrual. The Social Security tax and these other taxes have caps. So that's very important to calculate. Let's just say the Social Security tax cap is $100,000. Employees that make $50,000 a year will never hit that cap. So the percent of Social Security tax, which you'll enter, they'll get that every month. The employer will get that expense every month for 12 months. Employees that are much more highly compensated, at some point, they'll exceed that $100,000 cap, and the amount of payroll tax that they're paying for Social Security will drop to zero. And we'll see some examples of that. Same thing with, various other taxes. Okay. We talked a little bit about, the different types of salary spreads that are available. for different cadences. One of the more interesting ones is when you have a leap year. Some companies want to basically have a 53rd week in the year. And while that doesn't actually affect how the employees are paid, it does affect how the expense in the company is booked. And so we built some logic around that. We've built, obviously, some logic around headcount when new people are hired. We've built logic around merit increase. So merit increase is an interesting thing because obviously it affects your base salary, which then affects things like bonus percentage and how your Social Security taxes being calculated, because now you're making more money, the deductions has to be greater, and you'll hit the cap sooner. We put some logic in here around promotion. So if people get promoted, that's much like a merit increase. That affects the salary-based calculated benefits. Headcount and also transfer logic. So what happens if one person is known to move from one cost center to another cost center? How do you handle that? And what if the benefit rates are different? What if they're getting a raise when they move? That kind of thing. So that's accommodated as well. All right. So we're going to take a look at the input templates next that drive all these things. I won't go through it in the PowerPoint. It's probably much better to see it rather than have me talk about it. Last thing I really want to talk about is, kind of securing by roles. Basically you're going to have two groups of people in this example. You'll have people who are using the system as a inputter and using reports, and then people that are really managing the rates. So, only one person should be putting in the Social Security cap rate for the United States. It's the same for everybody. If anyone, it should be done one time by one person. Letting more people do it only makes it more communication have to happen around what the right number is to use, and only increases the chance for error. So we have that kind of role, the HR rate management, and then we have the HR planners, which are the people who are going to make adjustments. Okay, that all said, let's take a look here at what these actual input templates are, and then there'll be time at the end for questions. So how does this work? First step is really, you get an annual salary out of your HR system. So for your HR system, you need to have a way to spread that based on the calendar. And the calendar may not be the same every year, as we talked about that 53 week year. So basically, let's say for these people here, we're just going to, the full-time employees, we're basically going to give it to them flat, right? It's going to be 12%, 1/12 for every month. For part-time, it could be a different rate. If you want to give them 9% one month and 7% the next, and so forth, that is completely at your discretion, and the system will calculate based on that. So that's how, when this runs, the salary, the payroll information coming from your HR system spread out across all of the different months. All right. Kind of the next step is, notice we haven't run the logic here, is, we want to put in a rate for the different benefits. And, what we're accommodating here is quite a few different things. And these are all, any HR person who's done HR planning, is basically, these are standard things, right? Everyone, if you open your own paycheck, will see you have to pay federal unemployment tax, perhaps state unemployment tax. And if the state this cost center is in doesn't have unemployment insurance or something of that nature, or if it's a different rate, you can just leave it blank and it won't calculate anything. So it basically allows you all these different possible entries to input. Again, also, you can do this. We have basically selected one employee type. So if there are different tranches of employees where there's, maybe some employees get at one level get a 401k rate of one rate and some get a lower, that's accommodated for by the system. So enter all this stuff. I'll just enter in some percents today. We can, once you enter it, you can copy it over. It's all, anything you can do in Excel for the most part, including macros, is supported by what the tool we're using right now, which is actually Analysis for Office. This tool, basically, for those who aren't that familiar, maybe I'll just spend for a minute on what this does, is basically it's an Excel front end that will save this data to a server, a database, and then it will go and run a planning sequence when we press this button, and it will run all those calculations. So the thing I'm not showing you right now is loading all the HR information, because that kind of happens on the back end. So you load that up, load your rates in the AO front ends, and then kick off the planning sequence, which does all the math and the hard work, and just gives you an output. But you have to feed the beast a little bit here for that to happen. So step one really is load some rates, and these are usually given by the HR department to the finance department. So you load those up, save them, and then you kind of need to work on the next thing, which for some of those rates, you need to input caps. So just like we talked about before, the caps are, something that applies for the whole year. So it's not really a monthly input. Federal unemployment cap is actually usually pretty low. Not really sure what the Medicare cap is. Social Security is usually very high. And then state unemployment really depends on the state where your cost center is at. So you enter these items, right? And this is going to be the cap that percent logic is going to drive against. So if anyone has a paycheck in their hand, you can watch these calculations happen over the year. If you lined up all your physical pay stubs, if you still get those, you would see that your deductions will change, and often, your actual amount going into your bank will actually increase at the end of the year, towards the end of the year as these caps are met. So this is loaded up, and then that's provided there. So we input for caps. All right. So now we have to input for the flat headcount based drivers. So these are the things that aren't driven off your salary. What's the assumption for the company share of dental insurance? $50 a month. What's their support for medical? What's their support for prescription per month? And, if there's other health. And, this can be any what you have here as far as accounts and benefit accounts is certainly not limited. It's all defined, when you set up the model. So, just because if you see something missing, it's just because we didn't add it. It certainly can be added. You can save that up. So after all these kind of input drivers are entered, the logic's running. The logic itself takes about 3 to 4 minutes for a company of about 10,000 employees. So it happens pretty quick, and the beauty of that is if we need to change the assumption on standard pay raise. We had a bad year, pay raises are going to be small. You go in there, you click, take the 3% or whatever you added for your merit increase. We didn't actually even cover that template because we don't have time to cover every individual one, and you can change it. The healthcare benefit assumption was wrong. If there was a last minute change in one of the tax rates, you can enter that, rerun the whole planning sequence, and that rerun of the planning sequence will affect not only all the employees that were part of the payroll, but also the new entries and new employees that are part of the system. So if we take a look at this, this is kind of your output report. You can see basically it's taken James's annual salary here, and there's a cadence in here that is not perfectly symmetrical. There's a little variance in each month as to how the accounting for it actually happens. The bonus accrual is based directly on the amount of the salary. 401k as well. So even though there's a little variance here in the salary, it's picked up. If we had made this symmetric, these would be symmetric. You can see here, and this is where really for me, the additional detail that comes by using this system comes from is that it's actually calculating the Social Security tax by this person. And as they exceed the cap here, you can see in the last month, it actually accurately calculates that they're going to hit the limit. And so it won't be 3173 anymore. The limit is going to be 1268. And if we go over here to the side, you can see that we put the Social Security tax for the employer share, it's going to be at $20,000, which is obviously a percentage that's driven off the salary. Medicare tax, again, this one was consistent. These lower rate things that are paid, the Medicare tax, the federal employment tax, which is low state unemployment, these were all covered in the first month, and they were calculated as well. Then we move on down to the dental and the medical and other health. So, here, these are all flat-based, right? As long as the person's employed, they have a monthly expense that occurs to the company. Just to note, this does not represent the employee's share. A lot of times people ask, is that also planning the employee share? The employee share is not actually an expense to the company. There may be cash flow implications for that because the company probably has to pay for the healthcare insurance at the beginning of the month and then deducts it as the employee is paid, but that's handled by the payroll system. All right, and you can see here, it iterates. Paula Davis, another employee, different pay, gets different deductions, and all the numbers are different, but driven from the same assumptions. So you got a very accurate, you can see here, Paula makes a little bit less, so the state unemployment tax is actually driven across 2 months instead of one as in the example before. Here we got John Andrew, so you can kind of see there, it's thinking. The system thinks, it calculates at a very granular level, each individual amount, so that when you roll it all up into your budget or forecast, it's as accurate as it can be. But, so far we've only taken some assumptions and the payroll information that was provided. We really haven't taken the additional knowledge that the cost center managers have. And to do that, we have some additional ways of getting that. Oh, we also have one more report. So everyone's always fascinated about how many people are in a department or at the company. So what we have here is basically a simple headcount report. All this does, and I just, this is a small one here for this example, but you could obviously do this. This is one cost center. You could do it company-wide, so you know how many people you have working in any given month. And You can also look at it on a more granular level by employee type. You can do all these splits because it's AO, by any dimension. You can split it by employee type and things like that. So you can get real granular in your reporting. But, only didn't want to trying to cover the functionality. So now that we've generated this whole plan very accurately, based on these assumptions that are different for varying cost centers, states, countries, as business units as need be, we still have other information that we have to get into the system. And this is where we've saved a huge amount of time by using this Fox-based logic in the back to do all these calculations. But but there's still things that need to get in. The actual plan for the year that may be driven off a strategic plan. You're opening a new plant, so you're going to hire additional workers. You're closing one cost center and moving everyone to another. These kind of things that are really outside of the driver-based planning need to be accommodated for. So we have some templates for that, and one of them is the cost center transfer template. This one allows the user, the planner, to transfer from one cost center to another. Basically, it's kind of an offset, really, right? So here we have someone transferring from accounting to finance. It's one individual, got their employee number, and we're going to transfer them. So to do that, we'll enter in their annual salary as an offset from one time period, and we'll put it in, as assuming let's say they're getting 20% bonus, and then they're going to go. Actually, that should be negative because it's an offset. You're going to have let's say they're also getting promoted, so we can allow that to go into a 35% bonus, and the transfer is going to happen here, and they're going to be making $60,000. So save that up, run the logic. The transfer happens. It gets backed out of one cost center, input at the plan rate because he was on the payroll at this rate, so that all gets negated. Goes back into the other cost center, or the new transferred cost center at the new rate, and the new bonuses, all the benefits calculate through at the new rate. Okay. What happens if we have a new employee? So, this is real important, obviously, because as we kind of talked about earlier in this, we'll have new employees that come in. New employees coming in aren't in part of the payroll system, but all the still same benefits will apply. And we don't know their name. So, there's master data here just for new employees. It's very simple to put in the date that they're going to start. Let's say someone's going to start in May. Say they're making $200,000. Why not? Let's play money, get 20% bonus, save that up, run the logic, calculates all that all the way through. So there's a couple other ones here I'm not going to cover today, but we're going to look at a detailed report now that basically shows how this all gets split out. So I'm going to walk through this, and then we'll have some time for questions, because it's good to have questions. I think I've covered a lot here, and it's a little bit of a one-way show because we got a lot of people on the line, and it always gets too noisy. But definitely going to have Lauren open it up at the end for some questions. Okay, so how did this all work out? So we can see here, and this employee was already someone in the system, but rather what I've shown here is a very granular example of what you can do with AO, because we're basically booking things in by data source. So I've pivoted the report to look at this by data source. So we have their base salary that was calculated. Then this person also got a merit increase, and you can see that amount calculated. And then they also got promoted. So, there's several different amounts that are available to see the individual amount that makes up their total base salary for the month. But you can also say, well, a lot of people want to know, like common corporate request is, well, what was the effect of the average salary increase on the bonus for the bonus accrual? And this is not an easy one to answer because you can say, okay, the average increase company-wide was 3%, but people have all sorts of different bonus rates. So how do you know what that number is? Well, because we calculated everything at the lowest level automatically in most cases, we can look at this for the merit, and I could run a report here and just exclude cost center and say give it to me for all cost centers, and it would roll up all the merit dollars associated for bonus. You could answer the same question for 401k and so forth. You kind of see it just goes on and on. You can even see the impact of Social Security. Now with Social Security, here you see the offset. So basically, even you kind of really see the math starting to work. The merit is factored in, right? It's in a component as well as this person's promotion that's factored into the calculation for Social Security tax. So you can see here, basically, once they have exceeded the maximum for the month, we have the offset, and that offset actually prevents it from, it prevents the amount from rolling to the budget continuously. It basically says, okay, you've paid enough. Now, no more. You've met your requirement. All righty. Moving along here, you can kind of see the theme continues, right? But first, I wanted to stop for a second here on dental. So if you notice on this one, there's something called vacancy factor. Again, this is another input template we didn't cover, but it's kind of an important business request. For a lot of large cost centers, let's say you have a call center at your company and it has 5,000 people in the call center. You could say, I'm going to budget for every position, but that there's always going to be turnover. You will never be fully staffed. You'll probably be 98% staffed. And you have no idea how much, at any given time, who that person is. So you can put in a vacancy factor, kind of cost center wide, and it will deduct at a level of against the expenses. It's kind of a macro adjustment to the total cost center expense. Okay. One last thing we're going to talk about, and then we'll open it up to questions, is how did that new employee that we planned turn out? You could see here the new employee starts in May. The bonus accrual, we've put logic in there for new employees that, they don't get a merit increase. We just hired them, right? So we don't have any merit increase for them. The HR bonus, we do accrue for it, but it doesn't, we don't start back here. It's just based on the hire date. The, same with the 401k and things of that nature. And I think the other important thing here is, I have to make an assumption. I have to assume that this person has never worked anywhere before. It's their first job, or they didn't work the first 4 months of the year, because I want to be conservative, right? So I'm going to start their cap on May 18th. I'm not going to try and guess at what they might have made somewhere else. Now, if it was a transfer from one part of the company to another, I capture that and I calculate that, and the cap remains. But here, we have this kind of nuance where you have to make some kind of assumption. I'm going to assume the worst case for the company with the maximum expense. That way, it's not a nasty surprise at the end of the year. It's an upside. So you could see here, we're calculating the caps for these different things. And for Medicare, they pay the whole year. But for federal unemployment, that gets knocked out in the first month, but it does hit in the right month, which is May 18th. So that's how that works. Same thing with state unemployment. It's based on their start date. So you can see how this kind of template's distributed. Well, this is a report, but the template to make these changes is distributed to each cost center planner. And now some people may plan for multiple cost centers, some plan for fewer. But that information gets captured, sent up to the database, saved, and then is available in these consolidated reports for anyone with the right access. And it also allows, no one has to have emails sent with the salary information. It's already loaded one time, saving all that labor in HR for taking the payroll file, cutting it up, sending it all around with all the problems that may ensue. This goes in automatically, gets validated by one person as correct. Only the people who can see their appropriate employees can see them. And, it just takes a lot of work out of the system. The other thing that takes a lot of work out of the system is the fact that all those calculations are automatically done. I spent a lot of time in my corporate career before I went into SAP consulting is, SAP products, trying to figure out what's the math, going back to HR saying what's the cap for this year. All that gets input by someone who knows. It's there, it's available for me. The first cut of the plan is done automatically for me. I just need to figure out the things that are happening in my department around whatever hiring strategy, cost center moves, things of that nature that I need to worry about. And all gets put into one plan. So Lauren, that's my speech. We've got about 10 minutes left, and if you want to open it up for questions, I think we're ready.
Sure. Thanks, Chaz. Great job. I see a question from Haga Johnson, but I can't seem to open it or see the actual question. I don't know, Chaz, if you can see that.
Let's see here.
In the question box.
I see the question. I see the asker, but
okay.
It says disregard. Yeah. It says false alarm.
Okay.
All right, wait, we got one question here. I got another one. Open this up. All right. Is the system deducting pre-tax items before applying payroll limits or caps to the salary data? Pre-tax. So, okay, I understand your question. So this would be a pre-tax item would be something like let's say in Illinois, we used to have, I don't know if we do anymore, you could have your Metro train card deducted pre-tax. But what you need to understand is this system only is worried about the taxes the corporation would pay. So something like the Metro fare card, while you do, that's a reduction in the tax the employee would pay, but not what the corporation itself would pay. So this system plans for the corporate expenses, the actual payroll expenses that are deducted from the employee's check. That would be handled by the payroll system. Good question. Any more? Let's see if we got another question. This is a good question. Oh, don't be shy. Come on. No one's at least even asked me for my source code. All you would have to do is ask, and I would send it to you perhaps. No, I don't think I would, but, usually I get someone trying to ask me for that. All right, got one question. I think another question that I get asked a lot is, can I do this on other versions of BPC? Absolutely. Embedded is a great tool, uses Fox logic. There are other tools that use scripting logic, both both in SAC and in BPC standard. Those tools, we've implemented very similar things, especially now, I think, with SAC coming on with the advanced formulas, you could very likely develop a very similar process. So we talked about embedded today, but a lot of other SAP versions of this tool, EPM space products, we can do the same thing. All right, any more? Oh, got another question here. Okay, so this the plan information reside in the SAP core system or the tool. So that's a very good question. So it really depends on which flavor of the tool that you're implementing this in and how you want to implement it. It can be completely standalone and you have all this detail in an independent system and push back the consolidated results to your core system with retraction, so that the sensitive information is really kind of maintained in a little fortress, and you have like a procedure that runs occasionally that moves that data. But there's a lot of different versions out there, and embedded. Are you on BW? Are you on BW for HANA? Are you how you implement this really determines where the data is kept. But regardless of how you implement it, you are able to get it into the various areas of SAP where you want to report. It may take an extra step or two. All right. Okay. All right. I'm going to say, give one more second for questions, and I'll start concluding, but I'll keep my eye open on the question box. I want to thank you guys all for joining us today and learning a little bit about the tool. BPC Embedded, a vast tool with a lot of different functionalities. We're just touching on one thing out of many, many things that it can do for HR, and it can do all sorts of other planning as well. It's a really rich system, but given the attention span and what I can get in an hour, and that's my attention span. Figured this covered HR, but it does all sorts of other planning, dollarization, rolling up, gross margin calcs, all sorts of things. So if you're interested in learning more, please reach out to Lauren, and she'll get back to you with some additional information, and we're always happy to meet with prospects and existing customers and discuss things. So, I wanted to thank everyone for attending, and you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you, Lauren.
Yeah,
and everyone for attending.
Take care. Talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.